the melodrama of the plot begins to pick up, and we are curiously ostracized from it or estranged from it a little bit when following the dramatic scene with Ellen and Archer. We follow Archer back through his life in a kind of dreamlike state. We are told on the way back to Boston from their little afternoon, he is on the boat, and then just a little bit later, like in the very next paragraph, we are told he wandered back to his club, and then he is on the train, and all of these little stations are kind of drifting by very quickly. The movement of him is almost separate from the reality surrounding him. He has become quite estranged from his own life. The snapshots of his actions just glide by with little significance, which is a rhetorical representation of how he sees his life. Everything is just sort of there and going past him, and it just doesn't matter. When he gets back to New York, as he's heading to his office, he runs into Monsieur Rivère, the Frenchman he met in London, the tutor, and he suddenly has a little flashback that, hey, wait a minute, didn't I see you in Boston at the Parker House? And what's going on? Of course, Monsieur Rivière is an emissary from Olenska's husband, the Count, who is sending him to try and bring her back, or at least convince her to come back. And here, I gotta say, the utter implausibility of this is striking. The coincidence of it is striking. It is, you could argue, another condemnation of the limitations of the realist aesthetic. Realism in the novel was often a little creaky on the term of coincidences, and wow, people just happen to be turning up in all sorts of different contexts, and like, wow, that's a really small world. That's so convenient that happened for the plot. It's sort of a trope of realism that you get used to, you go with, and it gives you some of those moments, but they're just ridiculous. Wharton, it could be argued, is just bringing this out as another sign that, well, okay, the realist novel is hitting its wall. There's not much that you can do with this. This is kind of a ridiculous limitation that we are all functioning under, and there has to be something more. The appearance of Rivière is also raising a little bit of a plot element that melodrama has always got to be gripping, in that it raises the specter again of Olenska's possible marital infidelity, or the scandal that Newland read about in her letters. There's this lurking suspicion that, well, maybe Rivière knows something about that. Maybe Rivière was, in fact, involved in that. Maybe he was the lover. Who knows? All of these possibilities are swirling out there, and it's all soap opera. It's all melodrama. But the lack of confirmation of this established question that's just hanging out there behind his polite Frenchman's face, even as he says very emphatically, I would hate to see her go back to that horrible, horrible existence, that terrible life. He might know something, and Archer has got to be wondering and trying to read him. There is that going on, but also the idea that Rivière, very much like Winsett, represented something to Newland Archer rather, in that he represented a kind of freedom. The freedom that Rivière had that great speech about to think for oneself, the intellectual freedom to have good thorough, authentic conversations, open, honest dialogue about intellectual and artistic matters. And here he is as an errand boy for somebody he doesn't even believe in. He says that he is there at the bidding of the count, but that given the first opportunity, he says, "Don't agree with me. Don't send her back." The freedom is suddenly brought into some context. How is this intellectual honesty when he is going around the world doing stuff as a kind of errand boy for this corrupt figure whom he claims to loathe? Where is the integrity in that? Where is the intellectual honesty in that? All of this is sort of swirling around this chance encounter that doesn't have a lot to do with the plot itself. We learn a few things from there, but it's not crucial. This could have been scrapped in the editing, but there's something going on there that is raising some questions that I think that have some validity. Archer, for one thing, at this time, learns that he has been excluded from family discussions of Olenska's fate. They seem to perhaps sense something. Now, he has been going along as the model of probity and integrity among the family. Everybody's always bragging, "Oh, well, he helped settle the deal with Olenska," but now they seem to be cutting him out a little bit, and that even May is having conversations with her mother and her grandmother and deciding, well, what is best for the family writ large. And somehow Newland is being excluded from that, and why? Chapter 26, from the question of freedom. This new chapter starts with a clockwork sameness of society life. Every year on the 15th of October, Fifth Avenue opened its shutters, unrolled its carpets, and hung out its triple layer of window curtains. By the 1st of November, this household ritual was over, and society had begun to look about and take stock of itself. By the 15th, the season was in full blast. Opera and theaters were pulling forth their new attractions. Dinner engagements were accumulating, and dates for dancing were fixed. And punctually at about this time, Mrs. Archer always said that New York was very much changed. The curmudgeon. What a great stereotype character, honestly. The old crank. But the sense of the kind of decadence of Europe is now contrasted with this monotonous regularity. That is a kind of decadence in its own. All of the social engagements, all of the high living. These people are, not exactly staying home, flagellating themselves. They are going out and spending lavishly on very expensive and elite entertainments. That contrast between the specter of the corruption of Europe and now in America, it's so much different. Again, that parallelism between the two is suggested. It's an obvious point of comparison, taking advantage of the chapter break to sort of bring them in very stark relief of one another. Archer is sort of suspended between these two worlds, between these two intolerable potentials, and with him so are we, because we are trying to, as readers, judge between them and say, well, Europe is bad, but is it really so bad? Because, look at New York. The idea also is that Europe is at least somewhat unbound and thrilling, but New York, with this highly regulated reality, with this constant hurly-burly that everybody knows happens like clockwork, and we are emphasized. It is so rigorously timed. There is something quite stultifying and limiting about that. That is striking, and we see again. How do you choose between these two worlds? The complaints of New York changing also have some very familiar names. Beaufort's financial dealings are raising great concern, especially for Ellen and Medora, who are apparently rather heavily invested with him, and the family has been cutting them out. So if their savings disappear, they are in real trouble. And also that social interlopers are starting to really make some progress. We're told that May has been attending the Sunday parties at Mrs. Struthers' homes. Kind of snakes in the Garden of Eden. This sudden, like, hey, well, who was this common person who just appears? And now, at first, everybody was like, no, nobody goes there. But now it seems to be making some headway, seems to be getting further into society's upper reaches, and that is a point of some concern for figures who are very conservative about that. Archer's concerns, of course, are much more narrow. 4 months had passed since the midsummer day that he and Madame Olenska had spent together, and since then he had not seen her. He knew that she had returned to Washington, to the little house which she and Medora Manson had taken there. He had written to her once, a few words asking when they were to meet again, and she had even more briefly replied, "Not yet." Since then, there had been no further communication between them, and he had built up within himself a kind of sanctuary in which she throned among the secret thoughts and longings. Little by little, it became the scene of his real life, of his only rational activities. Thither he brought the books he read, the ideas and feelings which nourished him, his judgments and his visions. Outside it, in the scene of his actual life, he moved with a growing sense of unreality and insufficiency, blundering against familiar prejudices and traditional points of view as an absent-minded man goes bumping into the furniture of his own room. Absent. That was what he was, so absent from everything most densely real and near to those about him that it sometimes startled him to find they still imagined he was there. Here, the opposition of social behavior and interior life, the maintenance of a love affair based on absence rather than presence, of separation rather than union. He is, again, somewhat estranged from his own life and looking at it quite objectively and coldly, and it is leaving him cold. The sudden realization that you are not really living an authentic life, that your life is somehow just a hollow shell and is being performed outwardly, but that you don't have any connection to it. You are, in fact, out of it. The absence is somewhat the nature of the narrative at this point, also moving along monotonously through all of this very busy and frenetic plot development, but very little of it is nourishing. Very little of it has that same weight that we had in some of those stream of consciousness outbursts where the plot is going by and the melodrama and, oh, will they get together, and oh, will they have this moment, and oh, it's so terrible. That is just clicking by, and we're watching it and taking the notes as we go along of this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. But perhaps we are starting to feel that same hunger that Archer is. We are starting to feel as readers that, you know, it's all just kind of silly. This world of his that is so busy and means so little is pitched in contrast to this kind of existential world of great significant but but no observable reality. We can't see it. It is not performed, it is experienced internally. Archer lies in telling May that he intended to go to Washington on business. May replies absently that, well, the change will do you good. It was the only word that passed between them on the subject, but the code in which they had both been trained, it meant, "Of course you understand that I know all that people have been saying about Ellen, and heartily sympathize with my family in their effort to get her to return to her husband. I also know that, for some reason you have chosen not to tell me, you have advised her against this course, which all the older men of the family, as well as our grandmother, agree in approving, and that it is owing to your encouragement that Ellen defies us all and exposes her to the kind of criticism of which Mr. Sillerton Jackson probably gave you this evening. The hint that has been made that has made you so irritable. Hints have indeed not been wanting, but since you appear unwilling to take them from others, I offer you this one myself, in the only form in which well-bred people of our kind can communicate unpleasant things to one another, by letting you understand that I know you mean to see Ellen when you are in Washington, and are perhaps going there expressly for that purpose, and that, since you are sure to see her, I wish you to do so with my full and explicit approval, and to take the opportunity of letting her know what the course of conduct you have encouraged her is likely to lead to." Whoa. It's reading, it's interpretation. It is a kind of cold-blooded May that we maybe haven't seen so much before. This recalls, of course, chapter 24 when Archer interprets Olenka's own opaque lines, but here we get like a full-throated charge at him that he interprets, and it is horrifying that girlish and innocent and somewhat, empty-headed little May can suddenly be so terrifying. And the scene ends with this little symbol, May extinguishing a lamp, saying, "They smell if one blows them out," which is a rather obvious metaphor for the passion she suspects between Ellen and her husband, but also for the interior life of Archer that harbors that love. It's clever, but it's another very obvious staple of narrative art that flourishes itself rather conspicuously. Another suggestion, perhaps, that this novel, as great as it is, this novel is a kind of performance too, and we need to peel away the layers and look through it to find something actually authentic.